Welcome to the Sports Umbrella, where we cover all aspects of sports. Soak in all the knowledge from our guests who range from pro athletes playing up a storm to industry experts making it rain. My name's Kelly Okun, and I'm a former pro golfer and founder and CEO of Fairway to Green, an equitable sports media company. Joining us this episode, presented by GalwayPlus, is Jimmy Roberts, quite possibly the best sports storyteller of all time. Jimmy shares the secrets to his storytelling success and reflects on the current and future state of golf. Stay tuned to hear about the next big project he's launching in the golf media space. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure.
You are the ultimate storyteller in sports. How can golf evolve its storytelling to capture younger and more diverse audiences, and why is it important to do so?
You know, Kelly, I tell you, I really believe that as we move along in this industry and we try and compress things and make things more concise, that one of the things that we're losing is one of the most important things, which is one of the things that drew people like myself into being a sports fan, which is people's stories. You know, I was never very good at statistics or numbers or any of that, but it was always people's stories who appealed to me, and I was a big fan of people like Jim McKay and Jack Whitaker and folks like that, Dick Schaap. Human stories are what made me a sports fan, and it's what made me want to get involved in the industry. And I just hope that we can figure out a way to keep that as a component of storytelling, because it goes back to the very beginning of how this industry was created. You know, in the early 1960s, so that's 60 years ago, or just about 55 years ago, a man named Roone Arledge created NBC Sports, and one of the kind of foundational tenets of what he did was creating something called up close and personals. And that's become something that I think that people use that term these days and they have no idea where it came from. So up close and personals were little stories that were created around the Olympic Games to help people develop a rooting interest so they could learn about people. And, you know, you're talking about the days when we were broadcasting, or I wasn't part of it back then, but when they were broadcasting events that involved Romanian weightlifters and Australian sprinters. And why would you have any interest? Well, the only reason you'd have any interest is if you knew a little bit about them. So Roone came up with this idea to create what he called up close and personals, which were short features which personalized these people and gave you a rooting interest. And I think it basically spawned an entire style of storytelling that was the standard for probably 40 years or longer. And I think it's becoming less and less part of the way things work, but I find that sad. And I think, you know, as a sports fan, I want to know about people. I want to care.
Thank you. Yeah, storytelling is at the core of my business as well, because I just think it's so important. Even watching NCAAs this past year and last year, just going out and seeing how incredibly talented the kids are, and then knowing that they're about to head to the professional tours after, they just have such interesting stories. And once you start just knowing just the tip of the iceberg of them, all of a sudden you're engaged and you're rooting for them and you're going to be a fan for life. So I do believe storytelling has an important place in sports.
Yeah, otherwise they're just people shooting scores. I mean, you can appreciate the talent, but in order to kind of make you invested, you got to know a little bit about them. And I think that's just foundational.
What would you say your formula for storytelling is, if you have one? Because you've done such a great job with it. How can someone like me or anyone else who's listening to this try to replicate and really bring those stories to life for athletes in the future generations?
Well, I personally, I'm a curious person. I want to know about people. My wife says that I don't talk to people, I interview them. And I'm curious. I want to know about people. And I think that I don't think there is a formula. I think there are certain types of formulas. Like I remember when I was a young producer at ABC News and I worked for a man named Dick Schaap, and many people out there may know Jeremy Schaap. That's Dick's son, but Dick was one of the first real kind of television sports journalists. And he was charged with the responsibility of doing stories in, a minute and 45 seconds or 2 minutes. And so we always used to joke that Dick would have a style where he would have a sentence in a story that would last like 4 seconds, and then there'd be like a 3 or 4 second soundbite, and then it was into the story. Now that's really superficial, but I do believe that you got to be concise, and you got to try and get at the heart. You got to be curious. I mean, I think that's what's at the heart of, of storytelling is a curiosity. It's just like trying to learn what you don't know. And, every now and again you stumble on a nugget that really is interesting. I don't think there is a formula. I think the only piece of advice that I would have for people who aspire to do this is to just be curious, and allow your natural curiosity to govern your path.
I love that. Thank you. And switching gears a little bit, some of the stories are outside of our control. We've seen some disruptors in golf over the last few years. What sort of impact and how can the tours handle these emerging leagues and the growing and changing sponsorship landscape?
I don't think they can. I mean, I think that change is inevitable. If you think about it, so the PGA Tour basically came into being, I may get this year off by a year or two, I want to say 67, when Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, and Gardner Dickinson were playing the circuit, which at the time was the tournament players division of the PGA of America. And they went to the PGA of America and said, we need to form our own operation. And so the PGA Tour was born. And it was pretty much the same from 67, 68 until, recent times. Now, I want to say 10, 15 years ago, Greg Norman proposed an international circuit in partnership with Fox Television that never got off the ground. But basically the thread of that became the genesis of the World Golf Championships, which have now gone away. And I personally think that the tour has, I don't want to say has been stagnant, but it's been pretty much the same product for a long, long time. Do I like LIV and what it's about personally? The team golf thing doesn't do much for me. I think that they would be smarter if they would play 72 holes instead of 54 holes. Some of the other things do kind of appeal to me. A shotgun start. I don't have any problem with a shotgun start. It means that it means that everybody's on the golf course and you can turn on your television at 2 p.m. and you can see everybody. In 4 hours, it's done. I don't really have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the music. I don't have a problem with short pants. I don't have a problem with any of that stuff. I do think that the men's game has been the same for a long, long time. And this challenge from LIV has been disruptive. I don't know if they're going to get their act together. It's been 2 years since they announced the framework agreement. Nothing has come of it. I don't know where it's going to go. I do think that the game of golf, the PGA Tour, probably needs to change a little bit. I thought the wraparound schedule was a terrible idea. I don't think they learned anything from tennis. Tennis was once much more vibrant, and they ended up playing all year round, and all it did was just leech their audience away. And I think golf tried to do the same thing. I think it's basic economic theory that if you want to make something more valuable, you don't make more of it, you make less of it. And I think part of the problem is that there were sponsors out there that were willing to pay. And so the tour had a fiduciary responsibility to try and serve its members and earn for them. On the other hand, the PGA Tour is not just the top 70 players, it's a couple of hundred guys, and they need to provide playing opportunities. And so they were trying to figure out that aspect of it. I mean, there's just so many aspects of it that are so complicated. I don't know what's going to eventually come of this. I hope they get their act together, because when you get, I mean, I'll tell you what it's been great for is it's been great for the Masters, and it's been great for the PGA Championship, and it's been great for the British Open, the Open Championship, and the US Open, because all the best players come together, and this is what, you know, golf fans want. On the other hand, you know, it's not really great for the PGA Tour, because now you got, you know, people like Rory McIlroy skipping Memorial. And that's, you know, one of these events, these elevated signature events that was supposed to be what these guys wanted. You know, and think about it. Rory's a member of Jack Nicklaus's club in Florida, and he's skipping his event. I don't know. Things need to settle down.
I would agree. And looking at the women's side, we have a new commissioner coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he's going to come in with a pretty disruptive agenda and try to shake things up? Or do you think he's going to continue Molly's legacy and keep providing for the mental health and trying to put the athletes first in her, well, I guess her legacy, her campaign as commissioner?
You know, I don't know that they're mutually exclusive, but I do think, first of all, Craig Kessler is a terrific guy. I know him well. And I think he's an energetic presence. And, you know, he almost was the CEO of the PGA of America, but they chose somebody else. They wanted a PGA professional, and Derek's a fine man. But I think that the LPGA Tour needs to figure out a way to capitalize on its stars. That's what makes the game more commercially appealing. You know, and there's a rub. Are you gonna basically service, you're gonna create an organization that features and services the top 15, 20 players, or are you gonna operate in service of the top 150? You know, there's evidence that if you want to grow in the public eye, you need to capitalize on your most favorable assets. You know, I mean, last year was a gigantic opportunity for the tour with the year that Nelly Korda had. And I mean, I won't say that they didn't capitalize, because I'm not so sure I would know what they could have done. But that's the type of lightning in a bottle that you don't get very often. And I think he's going to be very dynamic. I don't know what he's going to do, but I think he's going to be very aggressive and dynamic and try and figure out a way to make the LPGA more commercially appealing and capitalize on the stars. I mean, that's the formula, I suppose.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know with Nelly Korda's wins last year, I was so excited, and it's like everyone's going to know her name now, and only the people who were paying attention to golf at the time knew what was happening, and Scottie Scheffler was having an incredible run as well.
Yeah. But I don't know what they could have done. I can't tell you that I think there were any missteps. You know, it's a big responsibility for people like Nelly. So, you know, she's trying to win golf tournaments, but it's like the position that Tiger was in all those years that he was, you know, winning at such an extraordinary clip. There's great responsibility. You know, if you are that good and there is an opportunity to elevate the visibility of your league, your organization, it's on you. And it's a heavy weight, and, you know, some people balk at it. And, you know, you don't get paid any extra for it. And I think that to a certain degree, you're doing work that's on behalf of everybody else and younger players and the future of your tour. So I just think that, I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that I think that when those opportunities exist, they need to pounce on them.
I agree.
Yeah.
What you were saying reminded me of Rory and just everything he was doing to try to move the tour forward the last few years. And I think the PGA Tour definitely has more viewership. They have more bigger media deals and everything like that.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm curious how the media deals will change with Craig in charge and see if we can get more eyes on women's golf.
Yeah, again, I mean, I don't know how you do that. Look, on the one hand, women's golf is enormously popular in the Far East. And if you look at the difference between the men's tour, the PGA Tour, and the LPGA, and the LPGA plays part of its schedule in the Far East. And they're capitalizing on a market that really pays a lot of attention. That makes sense. But on the other hand, it kind of disappears from American consciousness for all the time that it's there. So you have to ask yourself, is that doing what you're supposed to be doing, or is that hurting you? I don't know the answer.
I don't either.
But they're different products, you know, it's wildly popular in the Far East, you know? So, I don't know.
And they produce some of the best players.
They do. They do. And that's another issue, you know, that you have to be honest about, which is, for the most part, the LPGA, even though the number one player in the world is American, for the most part, if you take the top 50 players in the world, a good deal of them are not Americans. And what kind of a challenge is it to make that league popular in a place where you're not talking about Americans? I mean, that's a hard reality and something people don't like to talk about, but it's a reality. I'm not sure it's something necessarily that plays into it, but I think to say that it's a non-factor is sticking your head in the sand.
I agree, and at least my philosophy is that's where storytelling comes in. If you can start elevating those women's stories, getting them fans in the U.S., then they'll know who's at the top of the leaderboard when they look at the scoreboard.
Yeah, I completely agree. Look, I remember when, Jenny Chisiraporn won the U.S. Open. We knew about her, and Sayri Pak. We knew about her. So it's not like people who don't come from the United States, it's not like we can't capitalize on their greatness. It's just a question of paying attention to them and, as you say, doing some storytelling.
GalwayPlus is the proud sponsor of the Sports Umbrella. GalwayPlus Sports and Entertainment is the first of its kind platform in the wealth and risk management sectors designed to cater to the diverse needs of affluent individuals, teams, leagues, and organizations operating within the sports and entertainment industries. Learn more at GalwayPlus.com. Switching up a little bit, you are working on a new platform that you're launching soon. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, so I love the game of golf. I've spent a lot of time covering golf, a lot of time covering a lot of different things, but it occurred to me last year that, if you're curious about golf, there are literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of places you can go: podcasts, television shows, radio shows, to hear about golf. But all of that is focused on the golf we play, or the golf that some people play. And the interesting thing to me is that golf is an enormous business. Golf is a more than $100 billion a year industry that involves more than 45 million Americans who play, and almost 127 million, I think if I've got my numbers right, 127 million Americans who are some way connected to the game of golf, whether that's playing or watching or involved in the industry. That's a third of the population. Yet there's no place that on a regular basis talks about, reports on the industry of golf. And it's a big business. There are more golf courses in the United States than there are McDonald's. There are twice as many golf courses as there are Dunkin' Donuts. The fastest growing segment of the golf population is women and people under 35. So the game itself is growing, and there's so many facets of the industry, whether it's tourism or manufacturing or entrepreneurship or media, or, golf course design. There are just so many different facets of it which are interesting to me, and they're multi-million-dollar businesses, and nobody's really talking about it. So I'm involved with a couple of partners, and we've put together something that we're very, very excited to kind of dive in and talk about all of those things, and hopefully talk to some really interesting people, people are very, very familiar with, who are not necessarily the people that you would think of as golfers, but they're in many ways who've gotten involved in the golf industry. And it's a growth industry, and there's a lot to it. So that's a lot of fun, and we're going to be launching in September with a podcast and a newsletter and a couple of conferences. So we're very excited about it.
I'm excited too. We definitely need it. Like you said, it's such a huge industry.
Enormous.
It's a missed opportunity at this point.
It won't be for much longer.
No, very true. Give us a couple months and you'll be there.
Yeah.
What are your goals with the conferences? Because you have the digital side where you're sharing information, but what's the point of the conferences?
To bring together leaders and people who are invested in the game of golf, to talk about some of the issues and to learn from each other, and just to gather and to share information. We may do it, at a Ryder Cup. We may do it at the PGA Merchandise Show. We may do it at the Players Championship. But there'll be natural tentpoles where we will gather, where people will be. And, there's so many issues. As much as we talk about Nelly Korda or Scotty Scheffler, we talk about television rights deals. We talk about new equipment. We talk about, I may have this number wrong, but golf travel in Ireland alone is a $35 million annual business. And my best friend from back home, he's on a golf trip now over there. So many Americans do that. And it's not only that, it's apparel, it's agronomy, it's golf course design. We'll be talking to golf course designers. We'll be talking to media executives. We'll be talking to equipment manufacturers. We'll be talking to media, as I said, media executives. So lots to talk about.
And are you hoping to encourage more people to enter the golf industry to work as well, or is it more just reporting on what's happening?
Listen, it'd be great if they do, but I think the number is 2 million people who work in the golf industry in the United States alone. So that's a big sector. There's a lot of people who are invested in this, and it's a big business. And I'm hoping that we kind of scratch the surface and find out plenty of things that we don't know, and, apply my own principles of curiosity and just asking questions, because it's good to know about what people are up to. And it's very exciting. There's all sorts of exciting things going on in golf. The ratings in golf, although week to week, sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. It depends on what week it is. But golf as a participation sport has just absolutely exploded. And I think the industry is kind of racing to make sure that it keeps up with it. So this is a business-to-business product, but I'm hoping that there are a lot of people out there who are invested in the game of golf. Like I said, in the United States, a third of the population is somehow, in one way or another, invested in golf. And, we'll hopefully talk to them. And, one of the things that I was just thinking about today is, even 10 years ago, if you would have thought, I want to play golf on a simulator, do you know that more people play golf on who are not playing on golf courses in America than playing on golf courses? So at Top Golf and at simulators and at PopStroke, all these places. And, I'm happen to be in the midst of building a new house. One of the things I'm thinking about doing is putting in a golf simulator. 10 years ago, that would have been it just would have been something that been so far beyond my means. But there's an industry that exists now that can facilitate things like that. I want to talk to people like that. I want to talk to the people who make and install golf simulators and find out about their business and find out how accessible it is to everyday people. Are they selling a lot? How much do they cost? And not just for my own personal interest, but because I think that's something that people are interested in these days,
Mm-hmm. And even with launch monitors too, making them even more accessible to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a TrackMan costs, you know, I don't know what the number is. It's some crazy number.
It used to be $20K.
Yeah, something like
somewhere
that.
around there.
But you can get these Rapsodo things now, or, you know, these other small launch monitors. They're $500. You know, that's really amazing that you can get that kind of diagnostic information with just your everyday Joe. And I think, you know, again, it's the evolution of the golf industry. So that's kind of a fun thing to look into.
It is.
Yeah.
And speaking of fun, a couple fun quick questions for you. What has been your favorite championship to cover? And it could be the champion itself, the venue, the winner, a winning moment during that time.
Well, the one that stands out to me the most is when Tiger won in 1997 at the Masters. I was working for SportsCenter, and I was the only interview that he gave. My son showed it to me the other day. He uncovered it somewhere online. And that was kind of thrilling. I mean, to be there at the beginning of the Tiger Woods era was very, very cool. I covered him throughout his entire career. But there have been lots of amazing championships, Ryder Cups. The Ryder Cup is just, it's just really a remarkable event. There have been some, I think back to 1999, the Ryder Cup at Brookline, and the American comeback on Sunday and all the controversy that was associated with that. That was kind of amazing to be there and to be a part of it. And then, you know, the story of Payne Stewart dying what was it? That was October, so it was a month later, I think. That was a memorable time in my life covering golf. But yeah, it's just so much. I think I've covered over 80 major championships and, 15 Ryder Cups. And it never ceases to amaze me how good the players are. Because as a recreational golfer, I struggle so much, like we all do. And just when I think about the sound that the club makes when it hits a ball and compresses it, and there's nothing like, being at, whether it's a men's or a women's event, and closing your eyes and listening to that sound, and it just makes you shake your head and understand how good these people are at what they do and how hard it is, to be that good, and how rare it is. It's just, I'm just filled with wonder and gratitude and admiration, because they're really, truly amazing. And again, there are very few sports like golf. I mean, if you think about it, and you're a fan of football or baseball or hockey or basketball, you don't have firsthand information for the most part on how to compare that what you're watching is elite. But if you play golf, you understand. Tennis is like that too, maybe skiing. But golf is, you have a direct frame of reference. And it never ceases to fill me with a sense of wonder.
Thank you. And I know the admiration you were saying about the players, I think most of us have those for the broadcasters too, because that's always tied. When we watch golf, we hear the broadcasters, we watch the golfers. What sort of legacy do you want to inspire and leave in this industry as you continue with your platform and whatever exciting things you have coming up next?
You're the first person that's ever asked me that. I'll say what I say to my kids, and I have 3 boys, and I always give them the same advice with whatever they do. There are the 3 most important things are to work hard, to be organized, and be prepared. And with broadcasters, there are 2 additional things. And I touched on one of them, which is the sense of curiosity. And the people I always admired were the ones who were broadcasting and asking questions, and they're filled with admiration because they're curious. And that's the way I feel, is that I'd like to think that lies at the heart of the way I go about my job. But the other thing is fairness. And, people who do what I do for a living are oftentimes considered the villains. And I think that if you can get up and you can look yourself in the mirror and understand that you've been fair and you've asked fair questions and you've made fair observations. You will never hear me certainly when I'm doing play-by-play, say something like, oh, that's a terrible shot. What you might hear me say is, I don't think he's going to like that shot, or she's not going to be satisfied with that. You just need to be very, very careful if you're not an expert at the way you characterize things. But it is fair to make observations that are fair but not flattering. It's just the way it goes. It's just, my job, I always have thought that my job, I don't know anything to the people I cover other than fairness. The people I work for are the people who are watching and listening. And what I owe to the people I cover is that they have a right to fairness. And I've always thought that I've been fair, but I do think that it's a tricky thing because I'm not out there to be a fan, even though I might be a fan. I'm out there to observe and give perspective, and it always needs to be leavened by what's fair. Fairness is the most important thing.
That's really special. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sure.
Unless there's anything else you want to share, thank you for coming on.
No, it's my pleasure. I love this game. I wouldn't have thought that a guy who's a 10 handicap would have, been able to make a living talking about golf for so long, but it's an amazing game. It's rare that we can, cover a game that we can also play, so it gives us, as I mentioned, perspective, and I think it's unique. It's unique, and it's a wonderful, wonderful game, and I hope I can play it and cover it for many, many more years.
I hope so, too.
No, thank you.
Jimmy, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.